この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Safe to say, up to this point in time, every servant I've covered in these JP debut reviews has had the advantage of actually being pretty good. Save for possibly Caster Shuten. Nothing about her apart from her body makes me particularly excited. And unfortunately, it looks like we have a remarkably similar case here today with Consort Yu, a real-life concubine of Xiang Yu. But in Fate lore, she is so much more, as she is also among a cult circle of top-tier vampires called the True Ancestors, a faction mostly only recognized by the die-hard Tsukihime fanbase until now. Nasu seems to have a penchant for writing important historical men's wives into demigods that are potentially far more powerful than their husbands are. Suzuka Gozen, then Narasaki Ryo, and now Consort Yu. However, as attractive as this makes her, Delightworks decided to pull a stunt with her to her abhorrent detriment. And I'm just going to tackle that stunt immediately, since it is the cornerstone at which everyone should judge her if you hold any stake in the gameplay of, well, this game, even if you just think she's hot and want her solely based on her looks. This noble phantasm. If Qinliang Yu, also released debuting during the Chinese Lost Belt, has one of the most intricately powerful noble phantasms I have ever seen, then Consort Yu has one of the most bafflingly miserable noble phantasms any servant could ever hope not to have. Everything about it seems pretty hardcore, though. Removing all debuffs from herself, a 50 to 100% buster buff for the turn before she strikes, a massive curse for 5 turns until there. You see it? Hiding in between her debuff cleanse and her buster performance buff. Remove all buffs from herself. Well, maybe you're supposed to spam it. At least I think so, but her deck is pretty lackluster for NP Gade. Maybe she has a super high attack stat to make up for it. Whoops. Her attack stat is actually the lowest among all 4-star assassins by a whopping 600-point difference. To put that in perspective, almost all servants in FGO usually only have 100 or less points of difference between each other going up or down the stat ladder. Okay then, surely she has a skill or something to compensate, right? At least a skill? A 1-turn buff removal resistance that only guarantees a guard against her buff removal at level 10. And no, ordinary debuff immunity does not stop the buff removal. I checked it myself. Honestly, I'm not even sure why her first skill provides it, seeing as both her first and second skills are focused on providing benefits over time. So I'll focus on those for a minute. Her first skill, Incarnated Soul, provides up to 10% NP gauge every turn for 5 turns with a 5-turn cooldown at level 10. Yes, that is correct. She essentially has a max limit broken Prisma Cosmos for a skill. It will never turn off unless it's removed by an outside source. Her second skill, Heaven's Feathered Woman, is nearly identical, but providing up to 1000 HP every turn for the same 5 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. So she's always gaining NP and HP unless it's turned off by something separate. Of course, of all the things that could be, it has to be her own noble phantasm? She's clearly trying to emulate her first boss fight in the Chinese Lost Belt by compensating for her deck type and spamming her noble phantasm. Hell, she's not even that bad of a critical star generator given her hit count. But that noble phantasm makes a potentially fun character into someone so heartbreakingly miserable. But wait, that 1-turn buff removal resistance. Clearly, I should attach a kaleidoscope to Consort Yu, then activate her first 2 skills to guard against the demerit, and now I'm recharging for the next one. That sounds like a pretty great idea, actually. Seriously. But then, I guess I'll just have fun waiting for 5 turns to do it all over again, because that's exactly how long I'm gonna have to wait, unless I want to lose all of the buffs that make Consort U recyclable and strong enough to kill anything at all. Doesn't help that I gotta get 2 of her skills to level 10 just to reach this dilemma as intended. Without a doubt, this has to be the most artificial waiting time I have ever seen on any aspect of the game from Delightworks up to this point. Unless I'm using a maxed out Tropical Summer Mystic code to break this pattern every 10 turns to attach yet another buff resistance removal on Consort U, I'm left with a wave clearer who cannot clear waves. You could argue that I just don't have patience, but she doesn't do much herself to break up the slog, save for an enemy NP gauge removal skill that also acts as an NP steroid. The game clearly wants me to move fairly quickly with her. Or does it? What if she's actually meant for a stall team? Consider the skill I just mentioned, removing enemy NP gauge, her HP, which is higher than most 5-star assassins, alongside a perpetual regen to that HP, the 5-turn waiting period, the hefty curse damage that sticks upon firing her Noble Phantasm. Alongside Mash and Merlin, this might be a fun way to kill a particularly strange enemy. And it could be a sign of Delightworks attempting to give burns and toxins a more prominent role for damage dealing maybe later on, since that's a major selling point for Consort U's Noble Phantasm in the first place. But sadly, that's all guesswork and conjecture. What about right now? What could she possibly be used for effectively right now? Wait, no. If she's meant to be fast, then... Oh, fiddlesticks. Consort U is meant to be a 3-turn farmer, isn't she? Granted, if that is the case, I'd be worried about that 3rd turn, seeing as there are only 2 immediate buff removal resistances available to her at this moment in time. And even if you make it work by leaving one of the turns to a Berserker or whoever you find to be appropriate, reaching level 10 for a guaranteed guard against Consort U's self-buff removal on both one of her own skills and a Mystic Code skill is a lot to ask for just to have a secure 3-turn farmer. It's not like those are exactly difficult to come by. Isn't that right, support list? Let's also not forget that her attack stat is so abysmal that even with outside party buffs, depending on who or what you're fighting, I'm not entirely sure Consort U would even be able to kill an entire wave should anything within it not be of a class she possesses an advantage against. In fact, I don't even trust her to kill what she actually does have an advantage against. I guess that's what the massive curse damage is for. Suffice it to say, I don't see the point in taking any of these risks when I could just use Lancelot or any number of servants who I know for certain will actually kill everything on screen in 3 turns. So, since it's such a big deal, and I figure we should consider how to try and fix her for everyday battles, there are 5 benefits her buff removal cannot affect. Craft Essence buffs, critical stars, enemy debuffs, NP gauge boosts, and one-time heals. For Consort U herself, I still recommend Kaleidoscope above all else to get her started. Black Grail is also an option if you're sick of her low damage and want to take advantage of her healing. Otherwise, something akin to Our Conquest is the Sea of Stars would be best suited to her. Bond Craft Essences are especially useful in this case, as they can simulate the buffs normally applied as skills by servants. Merlin and Waver both provide buster boosts with theirs, and longtime players should more than likely have either of these two at bond level 10 already. Fragments of 2030 and Jack the Ripper will be your best friends on a team focused on helping Consort U generate as many critical stars as possible to compensate with critical hits for some of the worst normal damage you will ever witness from a 4-star servant, next to the likes of Thomas Edison, Media Lily, and worst of all, Artoria Lily. That's why you should probably also take advantage of forcing enemy debuffs as much as possible. I have a few suggestions. Shuten Doji to balance out one of the weakest assassins with the strongest assassin alongside a parade of AoE debuffs. Matahari might even work to generate more critical stars, plus spot some of the highest percentage defense debuffs available. Regarding NP gauge boosts, there is no better choice than Skadi. She can also raise Consort use to quick cards significantly while also lowering the enemy team's defense. Plus there's always the evades from her Noble Phantasm, which always help. A more budget option would be William Shakespeare, since he too possesses a targetable NP gauge boost, but also wields a large team buster buff, which can be great for her Noble Phantasm, or a buster chain. Regarding increased healing, aside from Merlin, I would suggest Nightingale. She has a targetable heal, a targetable buster buff, the lowest star weight juxtaposed a 6-hit quick card, 2 arts cards to help with NP gain, technically 3 if you count her Noble Phantasm, which also heals us and debuffs the enemy team, all of which we want for Consort U. But here's the trouble of it all. Despite my recommendations, or any others you might hear or read from the community, there's almost no point in flexing our creative muscles on this. Besides her maybe being your waifu, despite the fact that she's married to another character you can actually summon, Consort U should probably not be your immediate go-to AoE assassin. Frankly, she isn't even good or interesting enough when regarding every other aspect about her to make up for that unnecessary stressful demerit which removes all of her buffs. No other AoE assassin has anything close to a detriment about them this bad. Instead of concocting a means to get the most out of a unique benefit, the focus of this servant is to work around an overwhelming negative which actively harms or defies every aspect of their respective capabilities. From what little I know about game design, I'm guessing that isn't healthy. I would rather use Phantom of the Opera because at least I can stack buffs on top of him up to high heaven. Hell, I would rather use Angra Manyu because his uniqueness isn't castrated by a game mechanic so bad that it makes me grateful strengthening quests exist. Seriously though, I'd recommend Phantom over Consort U. I promise I'm not crazy. Please give this man an animation update to Lightworks. And in case the day does come where Consort U is actually valuable for some new function or challenge quest, given her exposed physique, I have no doubt plenty of people do have her by now as a trophy. So I'm sure they'll be more than happy to display her in their support rosters should that day ever come. In other words, let the whales take care of this one. Save for the next waifu instead.